Welcome back to Football Daily, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're talking about Arsenal. That's right, I'm back, finally, on We Need to Talk after a couple of weeks on holiday. Hope you can tell by the tan. I saw the comments, by the way, on Transfer Talk, calling me an uncooked hot dog. I'm not happy. But despite my sunburn, I thought I would return with a stay or go. We've done loads of these. We are kind of recapping some of the ones we've done before. Today we're talking about Arsenal, because midweek, Mikel Arteta had this to say.
Well, we had 30 players here, which is unsustainable. And obviously the market is still open and things can happen, but we are prepared.
So I thought I would approach this from the eyes of Mikel Arteta and Edu and see who in the squad should be kept, who should be sold, who should go on loan. There's not going to be anybody in the contract exit column at the moment because, of course, the most recent contracts have already just expired. If that makes sense, you guys have seen me do this loads of times. Let's not waste any time, I tried to say. I'm very rusty. Okay, let's start with the goalkeepers. 5 on the books to get through here. Aaron Ramsdale, obviously number 1 in the sticks. I've seen a bit of debate going online about whether or not Aaron Ramsdale is good enough to take them to the Premier League title. I think Aaron Ramsdale's a really good goalkeeper. I think he's progressed this Arsenal team massively with his style of play. And although there are the occasional error, I think it kind of balances out because of his exceptional ability on the ball. I think Aaron Ramsdale, definitely number 1. Next up, we've got Renarsson, who I think we can put in the sell column now. He's 28 years old. I don't think he's featured for Arsenal since 2021. So a while ago now. He's under contract to 2024 as well. I don't see a future there. Next up, we've got Matty Turner, who's obviously going to be number 2, you would think, this season. And Hein, who's going to be number 3, probably. That does leave Okonkwo. He's not travelled on the pre-season tour. I think that speaks volumes. I think, although he's only 21, he's probably going to be sold this summer. Moving on to the right-back slot. And as you can see, 4 names down here. Maybe we could be looking at a couple of sales. Mikel Arteta obviously wants this squad trimmed down. I started with 36 names. I've included some young players in there that he probably wasn't talking about when he said he had the 30 names in the squad in the clip you saw earlier. But one of the names has obviously been kept, one of the best right-backs in the league last season, Benjamin White. Absolutely no need to change him, although with the arrival of Timber, it's interesting to see what that means for the future of Ben White. Does he tuck in to form a back 3 that will allow Zinchenko to move into a midfield role or Timber to move into a midfield role? Because classically, he has been a centre-back. Maybe his future moves back to centre-back now with the arrival of Timber. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how those two battle it out. Tomiyasu is up next, another player I would definitely be keeping. I think he's so versatile with that 2-footed nature of his. Not a huge amount of appearances last season because how excellent Ben White was and that injury at an awkward time. If he wasn't injured, I wonder how much further Arsenal would have pushed Man City towards the back end of the last season. And obviously Timber, having just arrived, an absolutely sensational player. What a ball passer. What a ball progressor he is. I think he could be used in an auxiliary defensive midfield situation where they shift across into a back 3 like they have been doing with Zinchenko at times last season. I think having Timber allows them to do that on the opposite side as well. Fabulous player, and I think it's actually one of the bargains of the summer. It's such a small fig. That leaves Cedric Suarez, who's contracted up in 2024. He's 31 years old now. Of course, loan last season, I think, has to go this year. They don't need 4 fullbacks in that right-back berth. 3 is more than enough, and Tomiyasu also offers cover at left-back. Ben White also offers cover at centre-back. I think Cedric Suarez is kind of a hangover from an Arsenal squad of old. The centre-back roster is very interesting because you've kind of got these 5 names, haven't you, immediately standing out. Saliba, maybe the best young centre-back in world football, alongside Josko Gvardiol. Gabriel, who I actually think had a better season than Saliba last year. Although when you lost Saliba, Arsenal fans will know this better than anybody. When they lost him for the run-in, it was just so detrimental. Just not ideal, losing the best young centre-back in world football at any stage. And obviously got Kivior, who came in January. I actually think he looks really good. With that left-footed option, clearly an amazing passing range. He offers depth behind Gabriel. I think if you've got Kivior backing up Gabriel, you've got Ben White backing up Saliba, you've got Tomiyasu, who can also play as an auxiliary centre-back if absolutely necessary, as can Jurrien Timber. We've seen him play at centre-back for Ajax on numerous occasions and for the Dutch national team. I think that's a really good balance of right-back central defensive options, which means I think I would probably sell Rob Holding. He kind of struggled when he had to fill in for William Saliba. This new system that Arteta plays, not necessarily suiting his game. I think he's a fine Premier League defender. He would do a really good job for a lower mid-table side. And you know what? If the offers didn't come in, there's no problem with keeping him, is there? Because he's just such a good personality to have around the dressing room. That leaves, of course, Trusty, who was Birmingham's Player of the Year last year, wasn't he? On loan, but he is 24 now. There's heavy interest in him from Rangers, reportedly. It was an interesting experiment to bring him in, but I think if they can get 4 or 5 million for him, it's probably time to sell him. The left-back slot I also think is really interesting, because obviously Zinchenko being kept, leader in the side, that inverted fullback position is going to be super, super crucial to how they play this year, yet again. And then you've got Tierney and Nuno Tavares. Let's start with Nuno Tavares, I think, because I just don't think it's going to work out at Arsenal. Great season last year at Marseille, went off like a rocket, didn't he, scoring all those goals from that wing-back position. But I think that is part of the problem. You're never going to see Mikel Arteta use a wing-back system now. He's moved to these inverted fullbacks. That's why he signs Jurrien Timber. Zinchenko is so key to the side. And Kieran Tierney, I think at this stage, you may as well sell. I think he's a really good player, Kieran Tierney. And again, I think he could do it for a top 6, top 8 side, definitely. But the way Arteta has this side functioning, in pre-season, I've seen Timber used at left-back, Tomiyasu used at left-back, Kivior used at left-back, all ahead of Kieran Tierney, and that's without Alexander Zinchenko in there, who's been injured. He's only 28 years old. I do believe Premier League sides would be interested in him, so I would be selling. Next up, we've got Declan Rice, obviously a keep. One of the signings of the summer, maybe a tiny bit of an overpay, but who really cares, because he's going to be sort of franchise player for this side alongside Bukayo Saka and Martinelli, Ødegaard, Jesus for years to come. He's just stunningly good. And that leaves the big question, doesn't it? What to do about Thomas Partey? I'll be honest, I think personally, with the arrival of Declan Rice, clearly they're planning for the long term here. I think if you can get Fabinho money, like Fabinho has obviously gone out to Saudi or is in the process of going out to Saudi for £40 million, for 30-year-old Partey, I think I would sell. I would use that Liverpool model, They've been willing to accept that fee because they know they can reinvest it in a player like Romeo Lavia. I think Arsenal already reinvested that money in a player like Declan Rice, who is going to be the long-term player in that role. I personally thought when he arrived, he might be used, or before he arrived anyway, he might be used on the left side a little bit more advanced. But with the arrival of Kai Havertz and how we've seen Arsenal lining up in pre-season, Trossard has at times played in that left-hand side 8 role. Maybe that's not where they see Declan Rice playing. And if he is going to be a defensive midfielder and you can cash in on Thomas Partey to the tune of £40 million to reinvest in a backup or some competition for Declan Rice that's going to suit you in the long term, I think I would be really tempted. If you don't get that £40 million-ish fee, then he's an obvious keep, isn't he? But for now, I'm going to pretend the offer comes in from Saudi Arabia to the tune of 40 million, like Fabinho, I would sell. Jorginho, I think you may as well keep. If I've got Partey on the sell column, partly also down to his injuries, by the way. I didn't really talk about that, but in those 3 seasons at Arsenal, I think he's got 18 Premier League starts, 23 Premier League starts, 25 Premier League starts. He's not a player who's going to play every minute of every game. And Jorginho, a fine backup. He's got 1 year left on his contract. I don't think you're going to be able to command any sort of fee. A leader in the dressing room probably since he arrived. I would be keeping Jorginho around the club. What that means for Sambi Lokonga, I think probably in the sell column. I know he's only 23 years old and obviously he was on loan last season at Crystal Palace, but it was just 3 full 90 minutes when he was at Palace. Hasn't been favoured by Mikel Arteta at all, really. Not sure he totally suits the lone pivot 6 role that a Rice or a Partey can perform, or the 2 quite advanced 8 roles where we're now seeing Havertz play and Martin Ødegaard play. I don't see where he plays for Arsenal. I can't picture it. I just don't think he's ready. I would sell. Next up, we've got Mohamed El Neni, who I think, like January, obviously we would have all had him in contract exit, but he signed the extension in February, didn't he, the 1-year extension. I don't think he's going to play many minutes, but clearly off the field, he's a huge force of nature. Big personality, everybody at the club loves him, and sometimes I know this doesn't suit a lot of statistical agendas and stuff. You do have to have just personalities in the dressing room that combine the team together, everybody loves, and is a bit of a leader. And clearly that's what Elneny is, even though he plays very limited minutes. Charlie Patino, I think he's going to get sold, so let's put him in the sell column. He wants first team minutes. I think they probably will sell him with a buyback clause. You know, very good season last year at Blackpool. He's talked kind of publicly about wanting first team football. He's only 19, and he's probably not going to get it at Arsenal. So I'm very interested to see where he lands and what fee they get. Into the advanced midfielder roles then. Ødegaard, obvious keep. He's the captain. Kai Havertz, obvious keep. Just joined the club. I can't wait to see what Kai Havertz does for this first 6 months and how he fits and how he gels alongside Martin Ødegaard in those advanced midfield roles. It's just such a big change up from how he's been playing at Chelsea. It's going to take some real coaching. That leaves two players here, Fabio Vieira and Emile Smith-Rowe. I don't think there's necessarily space for both of them. They want to fill kind of similar areas. Both Fabio Vieira can also offer cover on the right for Bukayo Saka. Emile Smith-Rowe slightly more of a left winger, but they can also play in those advanced midfield roles. Both very, very good technically. There is the argument to be made. Do you sell Emile Smith-Rowe? Do you take the fee? It's going to be a big fee. He's technically superb and risk it coming back to bite you. I don't think he started a Premier League game last season. He had that terrible, terrible problem with his groin surgery. Couldn't get going. Very stop-start. Still only 22. I would be keeping him for another season. I think he'd be a massive player for Arsenal this coming season. You look back to the season before last when he put up such sensational goal and creation numbers, dribble numbers, and I would be loaning Fabio Vieira. I think Fabio Vieira is technically brilliant. We saw the goal midweek in the pre-season game against Barcelona. An amazing technical player. I just think physically there's development there for him. I think it was just 3 Premier League starts last season, 22 appearances in total, so 19 of them coming off the bench. I'm not sure those 19 bench appearances are developing him enough in English football for the physicality. I think he would be better served going out on loan to a Premier League club and kind of understanding and learning the physical nature of the Premier League. Personally, that's my opinion. Arsenal fans, I'm very keen to hear what you've got to say here. Would you keep, sell or loan Fabio Vieira? I think he's one of the more interesting topics in this squad list. Into the forward line, we can fly through a couple of these. Bukayo Saka, Martinelli, obvious keeps, aren't they? Who else we got in here? Trossard, obvious keep, only arrived in January, great versatile player. I would also be keeping Reece Nelson. You know, he had injuries towards the back end of the season, but had huge impacts off the bench. I think he's a really good player, Reece Nelson. Plays all across the front line. And that leaves players like Pepe. Got to be sold. What a crazy fee. You look back on that now. But equally, at the time, there was a lot of hype about Pepe coming out of France. I can't necessarily blame Arsenal for taking a punt on him. Hasn't worked out. You know, I think you've got to try and ship him back to France. Marquinhos, also, I will be sending on loan. Of course, he was on loan at Norwich last year, wasn't he? Or at least from January onwards. I would be looking at another Championship, low-end Premier League loan for Marquinhos. I don't see him being able to compete for any minutes with Saka, Emile Smith-Rowe, or Martinelli, or Trossard, or Reece Nelson at this stage. And that brings us to the strikers. Gabby Jesus, obvious keep. He's going to have an amazing season. I'm aware it was only 10 Premier League goals last year. I think he'll rinse his way past that when he's fully fit for an entire campaign and doesn't have a sustained injury period. Eddie Nketiah or Flo Balogun then? It's a really tough call. I would personally keep Eddie Nketiah, proven that he can score goals in the Premier League in short sustained patches when players are injured, just like he did last season, and that's what I think you need from the backup. And the reason I've picked him, to be honest with you, over Balogun is that I think actually Balogun has a higher sell-on value right now because his stock is so high. Those 21 goals coming out of Ligue 1, he's so hyped and talked about. I feel like his fee you could get Balogun is actually probably more than Eddie Nketiah, who was a backup at Arsenal last season. Sure, he scored some very, very important goals and had a really good period, but he didn't sustain it and have those moments like Balogun. Right now, for me, Balogun is the more attractive signing, and that makes him a better sale for Arsenal. I just don't think you need all three on the books. You know, Trossard can also play through the middle, can't he, as a 9. If needs be, Martinelli can too. I think you can get a big fee for Balogun. You can get 40-odd million if you can get him to the right club, maybe an Inter Milan. So those would be my keeps, my sells, and my loans. No contract exits, of course, because players' contracts have just expired. Arsenal fans, I want to hear from you guys at home. Do you agree with me? How many of these have I got wrong? Mikel Arteta are obviously talking about culling a lot of players, so I've culled quite a few down. I think Mikel Arteta would be pretty happy with that. But are you? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you later.